Markets are in turmoil after a crucial announcement. U.S. President Donald Trump has ended negotiations for a new congressional pandemic relief package, which was set to include direct aid for unemployed workers, airlines, and small businesses. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closing 400 points lower on the news. Asian markets are far from upbeat, and European indices are pointing downwards following Trump's tweet that he would only entertain the idea of a new aid package after winning the election. Democrats and Republicans in Congress are already struggling to reach agreement, divided on the price tag and exact priorities. U.S. unemployment remains stubbornly high, with industries like the airlines especially hard hit. Well, President Trump's unexpected tweet came hours after the U.S. Federal Reserve chairman urgently appealed for exactly this type of aid from Congress. Powell warned that without further help, the U.S. could enter a recessionary, quote, downward spiral with tragic outcomes. Here's some of what he had to say.
The burdens of the downturn have not been evenly shared. The initial job losses fell heavily on lower wage workers in service industries facing the public, job categories in which minorities and women are overrepresented. Combined with the disproportionate effects of COVID on communities of color and the overwhelming burden of childcare during quarantine and distance learning, which has fallen mostly on women, the pandemic is further widening divides in wealth and economic mobility.
So what does all of this mean? I'm joined now for more on that by Arthur Sullivan from our business team here in Berlin and by Chelsea Delaney, our financial correspondent in Frankfurt. Good day to both of you. Arthur, President Trump calling off the talks with the Democrats. What does this mean for the aid that's needed right now to get unemployment down? It's at about 8% right now.
Well, Brian, in the short term, it means the aid is obviously not coming. And at the moment, a lot of the economic data coming from the US suggests that the recovery is not just slowing, it has stopped. So it's quite urgent for various businesses, for households, and obviously for unemployed people to get money through as quickly as possible, because when you are in shortfalls in these situations, delay is not your friend. Even if you may have hopes of recovering in the longer term, if you don't get the money in the short term, it's no good. So, for example, a lot of the unemployment benefits which were processed during the first wave of relief, which was in the earlier stage of the pandemic, that dried up around July. So households and unemployed people need that money back, obviously, as soon as possible. On the bigger picture, a lot of larger businesses, for example, the airline sector, which we've already obviously discussed, that's something that just last week, several of the USA's largest airlines furloughed tens of thousands of workers. They need this money as well in order to get some of those workers back. So it goes from individuals who are unemployed to quite large companies.
And for the individuals, we're talking about the $1,200 Trump check, as it's called, right, specifically, that will not be cut then for those people.
Well, it's not just that, it's also extended unemployment benefits that were supplementing like other supports. So there are quite a few different federal supports which have dried up. So it's a range of measures, really.
Okay, Chelsea, how are the markets reacting where you are in Frankfurt?
It's no doubt this was a major shock to the markets, because all of the signals that we had been getting from both Republicans, Democrats, Trump himself, had been that everyone was committed to getting a stimulus package passed before the election. So we've definitely seen a shakeout in the markets because a lot of investors had been betting on that. We saw U.S. indices fall more than 1% yesterday. We have seen a bit of a recovery over the past couple of hours. U.S. stock futures have recovered. European stocks do appear to be opening in the positive territory today, because Trump now is signaling that he could push for some standalone bills. So he's tweeted that he would like the airlines to get some support. He would like another $1,200 stimulus check to go out, but they still are not going forward with a large-scale stimulus, which is definitely a disappointment for markets.
The standalone bill could be interesting. We'll see where that goes. But what about traders in Frankfurt? What are they saying about the reasoning behind the move to stop the talks?
Yeah, it's hard to see what Trump really gains from pulling out of these stimulus talks, especially as Arthur discussed, it's very necessary for the U.S. economy as so many people are still out of work, so many businesses are still hurting. Trump himself has said that they want to focus on getting the Supreme Court nominee confirmed. So they want to make that their priority right now. But that's got to be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of voters who have seen their livelihoods impacted by this. It also could be that he would like to sort of emphasize for voters that if they vote for him, that they would get a stimulus right after the election, whereas with Democrats, they would likely have to wait until January or later until a new Congress is seated to go forward with the stimulus effort. So that puts a little bit of time pressure that could maybe work in his favor, but it's difficult to see the logic here.
Arthur, with so much at stake for people dependent on these checks right now, suffering from the pandemic, the guidelines, and for the president, do you foresee the possibility of a deal to bridge the gap between the Republicans and Democrats in the next couple of weeks?
I certainly wouldn't rule it out, because very often what Donald Trump says is very different to what he ultimately does, so you can't rely on what he's just tweeted. But the reality is, at the moment, the supposed difference between them is about $800 billion. So that on the surface seems like a massive, massive difference in where the Democrats and the Republicans are. However, the need for something to be done, Brian, I think is so great that it's unlikely to drag on for another month, because if it does, the consequences for millions of people across the United States would be quite dire, as Jerome Powell pointed out.
Arthur, thanks so much for coming in on this. And many thanks to Chelsea Delaney in Frankfurt as well. Staying in the U.S., Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden has said he and President Trump shouldn't have a debate if the president is still infected with the coronavirus. Biden and Trump are due to hold their second televised debate next Tuesday. President Trump said he's planning to attend, even though he is currently still contagious. The illness has spread through the president's inner circle. Top aide Stephen Mueller is the latest to test positive. Many of the nation's top generals are also now self-isolating.
Donald Trump is back at the White House and back in action after 3 days in the Walter Reed Medical Center being treated for COVID-19. The president tweeted today that he's feeling great and ready to take on his Democratic challenger Joe Biden in the next debate. His doctor says the US president is doing extremely well and reporting no symptoms of COVID-19. But there is no word on whether he is still infectious or when he last took a test. Despite this, the president is continuing to downplay the seriousness of his infection and the threat of the virus itself, telling Americans, don't be afraid.
It was a determined Donald Trump, wearing a mask, who emerged onto the steps of the hospital. 4 days after he shocked the world by announcing he and First Lady Melania had tested positive for COVID-19, Trump was back. After the short helicopter flight to Washington, Trump crossed the White House lawn and strode up the staircase. He made a point of removing his mask, offering a salute to the departing aircrew. And there was encouragement for the other 7.5 million Americans who've been infected by the virus.
Don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it. We have the best medical equipment. We have the best medicines, all developed recently. And you're going to beat it. I didn't feel so good. And 2 days ago, I could have left 2 days ago. 2 days ago, I felt great, like better than I have in a long time. I said just recently, better than 20 years ago. Don't let it dominate. Don't let it take over your lives.
But doctors are not convinced.
Brian, thanks for having me on. I think that the president may be in a honeymoon phase, as I call it, of COVID-19 disease. In the first phase, it's mainly the viral phase before the inflammatory phase sets in. We look for a warning sign around day 7 or day 10 when people can actually do a lot worse, require a lot more oxygen, and he may get better or at that point may get a lot worse, and that'll be around the weekend.
Those words will not be enough to deter the president. In one of his many tweets on a day of high drama, Trump pledged to be back on the campaign trail soon.
Well, let's take stock of the campaign trail with Chris Faulkner. He's a Republican strategist with Majority Strategies. And Liz Schulker is a former Obama campaign official. Welcome both. Chris Faulkner, can we start with you? We know that Donald Trump is out of hospital, but no one actually knows if he's better. No one will say when his last negative COVID test was. How can he lead your campaign if he's still ill?
Well, it's the president's campaign, and he's clearly showing that he's feeling much better. Positive spirit, as this president always does. Outspoken, positive, and optimistic. And we saw that from his statement. It's unfortunate right now that there's so much pushback from people that actively want the president to be sick and to be ill. Obviously, this COVID-19 has caused a lot of controversy and a lot of different political opinions. But at the end of the day, if someone were to contract cancer, if someone were to contract HIV or any disease, we would want them to be strong. We would want them to be positive and optimistic. And I think this president is showing his leadership by doing that.
OK. I wonder, Liz Schulker, is that what you're getting from this message? Are you getting a strong, positive president?
I think we're getting a president that cares more about publicity stunts than the safety of the American people. So, no, I do not think it represents a strong president at a time when, frankly, he should be quarantining and not taking SUV rides. OK, but now he's back. President Trump says he's raring to get back to campaigning. And we'll look at his tweet here. I'm looking forward to the debate on the evening of Thursday, October the 15th in Miami. It will be great. So, Chris Faulkner, is this debate going to be in person?
Well, I'm not as familiar with the specific details of the debate. But there have been plenty of precautions that have been put into place. And I'm sure between the president, the White House, national security, all the things that are involved with this, that they're going to show that the president is fine and is healthy before there's any kind of interaction with Vice President Biden. It's just the same thing. I'm sure Vice President Biden would want to make sure that he's safe. I'm sure they'll take every precaution necessary. But we have to focus on the important thing here. In this election for the United States is an incredibly important decision. And we cannot let the coronavirus shut down our economy. We cannot let it shut down our lives. And we certainly can't let it shut down our democracy.
What do you think, Liz Schulker? Should this presidential debate be an in-person affair?
I think, to quote Vice President Biden, we should listen to the scientists. And I think the safety of the people who have to work the debate, the candidates themselves and their families should be paramount. And right now, what we're seeing from President Trump is his inability to pivot and connect with voters remotely. And so he has to go back to his tactics, which is in-person yelling. And that's just not going to cut it in 2020.
OK. So meanwhile, the gloves appear to have come off. The former First Lady, Michelle Obama, has released a video message accusing the president of stoking fears about black and brown Americans. We'll take a look at a part of it.
So what the president is doing is, once again, patently false. It's morally wrong. And yes, it is racist. But that doesn't mean it won't work.
So, Liz Schulker, who's this message for? Presumably, Democrats already think the worst of the president, and Trump supporters appear like they'll forgive him anything.
I think this whole election, it's never been about the base. Trump has his base, Biden has his. It's about that slice in the middle. And that slice in the middle that felt uncomfortable about voting for Hillary in 2016, they're really feeling uncomfortable about voting for Trump now. So this is talking to the well-meaning folks, we all know them, they're in our family, who kind of wonder, is this really as bad as it seems? And so she's talking directly to those folks. This is racism, and if you vote for it, you're condoning it.
Chris Faulkner, is the president racist?
No. And this patronizing speech from the former First Lady is the same kind of condescending speech we heard from President Obama when he was president as well. Just assuming that Americans are somehow racist at their core, or just assuming that that's their first instinct.
Just to interrupt you, just before you get started, because she didn't talk about Americans as being racist, she talked about Donald Trump as being racist. Let's just, keep that on track, shall we?
She wouldn't say that unless she was trying to communicate to voters, as you said yourself. She's trying to tell voters that, hey, even though it's that you are racist or you might feel that way. That's incredibly condescending to assume that Americans are racist. The United States is the most open, is the most diverse, and is the most welcoming country in the world when it comes to immigrants and when it comes to mixing with different races.
And yes, on your president's watch, you have streets going up in flames, cities going up in flames, and black people being killed by law enforcement at a shocking rate.
The United States is by far not the most perfect nation in the world, but I would argue that our democracy is more durable and stronger and will protect the individual rights of more Americans on more days of the week than any other country in the world.
Liz Schulke, no one's accused Joe Biden of being racist, but he is just another old white guy. What's special about him?
I think the most important qualities Joe Biden has consistently shown his entire career in public service is he listens to folks and he's empathetic. He knows the pain that American families are going through, and he's able to show that. He also knows what it means to take a step back and listen. So as we grow as a society, as we learn more and become more inclusive, he's not too proud to sit back and listen and learn. And I think that's what he's shown since the beginning.
They all say that, the politicians. I'm going to listen and I'm going to listen to what the people say. But Joe Biden grew a 14-point lead in the polls, essentially by staying out of the way. How is he now going to compete with a resurgent Donald Trump, who appears to have risen from his deathbed?
I mean, we'll wait and see on if this is a resurgent Donald Trump. But I think Joe Biden will continue doing what he's been doing. Across the country, battleground states that were never even in play are now not such a long shot. And Biden will stay the course. He will continue connecting with people remotely, safely, and talking to local reporters so that folks know he's really listening to their issues. And I think when you see things like Trump not going after COVID relief money, that's not going to help him. And Biden knows what it feels like for American folks to hurt, and he's going to continue connecting on those issues.
Final word to you, Chris Faulkner. Let's pick up that idea of continuing to do what he's done. Now the president has apparently beaten coronavirus. What will he do if elected that he isn't already doing? And if he isn't already doing it, why isn't he?
Well, certainly, to be fair, I mean, it's not like the coronavirus caught President Trump. He caught the coronavirus and he's beat it, and he's leading by example in terms of how he wants to get back to work. Whether it's our economy, whether it's our schools, Americans want to get back to at least a semblance of normal life. It has been proven time and time again. I'm all about listening to the scientists. I agree. And most of the social scientists will tell you that if this kind of shutdown mentality that Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden want to continue to push is going to have such a negative, detrimental effect to our economy. The only way forward for us is to grow and to get back to work. And the president wants to lead us in that direction. He already has shown an incredible jobs record. And, you know, as you mentioned earlier, no, we don't have perfect race relations in the United States, but President Trump in 4 years has done more for African Americans and minority communities than any previous president since when it comes to important issues that affect those communities.
We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us, Republican strategist Chris Faulkner and former Obama campaign official Liz Schulke. Thank you both.